government. I don't think that was ever true. I believe that ever since Amway got started in 1959, they've had an anti-inventory rule, and I don't think the government stepped in and forced that. Now, what the government did do in the 1979 Amway case, the FTC, and particularly the judge, not so much the FTC, but the judge over the case, he determined that one of the reasons why Amway is not an illegal pyramid is because of the anti-inventory rule and the fact that Amway had a pretty good product return policy, and they also had their 10 customer rule in place. And those were the things that the judge said. That's why I think Amway's not an illegal pyramid, and that's how Amway kind of squirmed out of that conviction. And I think the FTC really dropped the ball on this one from the standpoint that they did not challenge Amway and forced Amway to produce the receipts for their retail sales. They just kind of let that go. The judge, his job is to judge the evidence in front of him or her. And so, if the FTC didn't challenge that point, that Amway claimed they had this rule and they enforced it, then that's the only evidence that's on the docket. And so the judge had to assume that was true without the FTC protesting that and saying, hey, show us some receipts. Then the judge made the right decision as far as the law. And I blame the FTC for really, not doing their job and really challenging that issue back in 1979. Any comments more about that one, Glenn?
Yeah, that rule has never, ever been policed. You won't find many rules that have been around for that length of time that no one's ever followed up. I think it's quite bizarre that you can have a rule like that and it's clearly no one's obeying that rule. If that rule was enforced, I think it would actually kill the MLM industry, because it's impossible to get retail sales. So much so that people aren't even attempting. My dad's been in for 20 years and he has never attempted to make a retail sale. The only thing he attempts to do is to sign up more IBOs, and that's what they all do. I find it bizarre. That's why I think we're not going to win over the FTC. We just have to show the public how bad this is, because the FTC clearly are not enforcing the law, and I don't know. I don't think it's possible to make them enforce the law.
Yeah, I find this anti-inventory or 70% rule very problematic to measure, because you just don't know how many products are going in the garage versus someone is using them. It's just very hard to measure. You can measure retail sales because you can require receipts to be provided. You can audit those receipts. You can ask these so-called customers questions to see if there's a big lie going on. You can talk to former distributors and ask them, well, what were you taught? There's lots of ways to, enforce a retail sales rule, but it's really difficult in my mind to enforce this anti-inventory rule. I just find it, and it's really not necessary, because here's the bottom line. If you can sell products, you don't need a big inventory because you're selling them. And maybe you're a bad salesman individually. Well, so what? Give your products, sell your products to your upline and your downline and let them sell them. And so, if there's retail sales going on, who cares about an inventory here or there, because anybody else can sell them theoretically. And so I just find this whole anti-inventory rule kind of silly. When it's it's really, the bottom line is lack of retail sales. That's really the bottom line. So anyway, I'll move on. They also, Tim was trying to make a sort of a generic statement that applies to all MLMs, and different MLMs have different rules. So, you can't just say this is true, because it might be true for some MLMs and then not others, but he tries to throw out these blanket things. For example, different MLMs have different rules for product purchase requirements. Some have requirements, or not. Maybe they're not even a requirement. Maybe they're just heavily incentivized to have auto ship, where you automatically receive a certain amount of products or a certain dollar amount of products every month. But that's not universal. That's not all MLMs. So, putting this stuff out, is implying that this is true about every MLM out there. It's just wrong. And I think Tim knows that. But again, I think he thought he was talking to somebody in Spencer Cornelia that just, has never been in an MLM. He hasn't studied them enough, and he didn't know enough to challenge that. So we'll see what happens going down the road. Because I know Spencer Cornelia has made a more recent sort of an anti-MLM video. So I don't know where his head is right now. It's hard to tell. I think his head is getting more viewers, to be honest with you. He doesn't really care. But back to you, Glenn.
I think all of Spencer's videos on MLM have been anti, except for this one. And that's what's so puzzling about it, because it doesn't make sense. He's anti-MLM, heaps and heaps of videos. Then he does one pro-MLM video. Then suddenly he goes back to anti-MLM. I guess he's had an opinion and changed his opinion for one day. Then someone managed to convert him back to anti-MLM straight away. It's clear to me that he just thought this was a great way to get. He wanted the biggest MLM guy there was on his channel, and that was the only way that he could get him on. And really, that is the only way. If you want to get Spencer on your channel, the only way to do it is to sit there and nod your head at what he says. If you're going to be critical, you won't get him. So
I do think he did a good job, regardless of his motivation, of drawing out lies from Tim Sales. I'll give him credit for that.
That's true.
Whatever his motivation was, so be it. But he got Tim Sales to say a lot of things that that Tim normally doesn't say, but he was there.
I reckon
either as an actor trying to impress him.
I reckon everything. I tend to think that most of what he said in that interview, he said in other videos. But yeah, you might be right. There might be some things that he wouldn't have said otherwise. But
yeah,
But if you knew nothing about MLM, and that was the first ever video you watched about MLM, you're going to think MLM is great. And that's why I have an objection to what he's done, because for someone who knows nothing about it, they watch that, they're going to want in. And
yeah, true, but that's only one video, so there's a lot of other videos out there that are not quite as kind to MLMs. So,
look at it this way, right? What about if you've got a son and you think MLM's the greatest thing ever and you want to get him into MLM, and you're like, if you wanted him to watch just one video, you get him to watch that one, and you say, hey, this is a guy who was anti-MLM like you are, and this guy explained it to him, and now he's pro-MLM. I think that could be a very effective way that someone could get somebody into MLM and make them totally and utterly just dismiss all the MLM debunkers, because, see this one? When he opened his ears and he listened and he's heard the other side, he changed his mind.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's a good point, because that's really what the upline does. They encourage people to listen to them, not other people. And certainly, if that's the only video you've ever watched on MLMs, then you would probably come away with a positive impression of everything. But that's why we're doing this show too, is to counter that. So
yeah,
that's why. Go ahead.
That's why the Tim Sales video is more effective than just an Amway person or Amway making a video like that, because you've got somebody who was anti-MLM who's now agreeing with it. That gives it so much more credibility.
Yeah, although, I wouldn't call Spencer Cornelia as being anti-MLM. What he does is he questions things, and certainly his previous videos came off as, very questioning of MLM, but I wouldn't call him, a rabid anti-MLM guy like you see a lot of other people online that are just against it, period. No discussion, no options. They're just mad, whereas Spencer Cornelia, I'll give him credit for always being questioning and critical, not so much, critical, as far as being dead set against something, but critical as far as asking questions that are, good questions and probing and that kind of thing. But I never viewed him as being totally anti-MLM, even though